Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and today I have a special guest. Her name is Zeona. Hey, Zeona, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm excited to have you here today on the show. And before we get started, let me just give our listeners a little bit of your background, and then we can dive in. Zeona has been an Airbnb host since 2012. After 10 years of managing short-term rentals across the globe, she has transitioned to selling real estate to investors looking to house hack or live for free. She is an avid real estate investor owning a double-digit portfolio of short and medium-term rentals. In the fall of 2022, she will release the book 30 Day Stay, an investor's guide to mastering the medium-term rental. Co-author with Sarah Weaver, she teaches listeners how to achieve financial freedom through real estate on her podcast, Invest2FI, co-host with Craig Kirillop. She has been featured on Bigger Pockets, Mr. Money Mustache, NPR, Business Insider, and many more than 50 podcasts. Zeona has been on 47 countries. She spent half her year in Boulder, Colorado, and the other half traveling the world as an international pet sitter. We can learn more about that in this podcast. Wow, I gotta say that's amazing. It's huge. You've done so much stuff, right? And and definitely the idea that of being able to travel and be a pet sitter and all that stuff. I'm sure that has a lot to do with what you have going on right now. Before we dive into that, though, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and where are you originally from and how was that for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I grew up in Hawaii, so I'm actually from Maui. And I grew up to parents that were quite poor. There was a lot of struggle there. I think when people think of Hawaii, they think of, wealth and luxury and beautiful places.
Expensive, nice, all that stuff, right?
Yes, but the other half is the working culture that's there, the people that are cleaning the beautiful homes and working in the restaurants. So there's kind of two sides to Hawaii. So I grew up with parents that weren't very good with money, and I saw a lot of struggle, and I realized wow, there's got to be another way. And I dedicated the rest of my life to figuring out another way.
Yeah. Wow. So how until what age were you in Hawaii, and when did you kind of move away from there?
Yeah, so I lived in Hawaii until I was about 18. I'd say maybe 17, I moved to California, and then I kept going back during college just to kind of be with my family. And so I struck out on my own really in Colorado, maybe 10 years ago. It's really
Got you.
Start.
Now, did you end up leaving Hawaii because of college, or you just wanted to venture outside of the island, or?
Hawaii is really small towny. And so it always really felt small to me. I'm an entrepreneurial person by nature. And so it just felt slow. And the people that I was around just didn't have that kind of crazy creative mind. And so I wanted to get out and find that for myself.
Yeah, got it. So talking about, the idea of you have this entrepreneurial spirit and mindset, where did that come from? Where did you pick up that and say, I want to do that versus doing something else, right?
Yeah, my dad was a hustler. So my dad is somebody I'd say who had the gift of gab. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. He's just this type of person that got so lit up and could just get anyone to follow him. And the problem with him is he didn't have the follow through. He had the dreams. And I feel like in combination with my mom, what I got was a more grounded experience And so I have the entrepreneurial side, but I also have just kind of a different, maybe a little more sense of right and wrong. My dad was very gray area.
Yeah.
But yes, I definitely got that spirit from him, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, in terms of just kind of going back to that, obviously growing up in Hawaii and not necessarily to a wealthy family and going through those
Yeah.
challenges, were there any lessons? Again, because a lot of people have that perception of well, it's Hawaii. There's a lot of richness and there's a lot of all these different things. So, were there any
Yeah.
lessons, major lessons that you can look back now and say, hey, that helped me see things differently or discover different things or anything that might have come out of that?
I mean, we moved around a lot, and I think that's something that has served me in my life as an adult, because now, as a real estate investor, I utilize what my home can make, and I go live in pet sits for free. So my home, I rent out on Airbnb about half of the year, and then we go live in places for free. And so this ability to move around and be creative, I think is an important skill. And then also just being frugal. I think frugality is a muscle. And so,
Mhm.
there is lifestyle creep, and that's real. But if you know that you've got that kind of understanding of frugality, you can always reel it back in. And so I
Yeah,
think in times like now where, we might be going into a recession, I think it's important to be able to live cheaply and be flexible and creative.
right. Yeah, no, definitely. So, as you were getting older, what was the obviously you said you had that entrepreneurial kind of spirit. Nevertheless, what was the one thing you wanted to do? Was it real estate or was it something else? And somehow you stumbled across real estate.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I think like what my mother instilled in me is like she had always done work that it was the only thing she could do, So it was like she was a cleaning lady for a long time. She later became a massage therapist, and it was just like she felt very limited about her options. And so when I was growing up, she always kind of said, if it's not fun, don't do it. And
Mm.
so I quit a lot of jobs, which maybe is not the best thing to teach your kid.
Right.
But what it did for me is it had me walking down a path of things that I enjoyed. And
Hmm.
so for a while, I got to be a cross-country tour guide, and I was taking people all over the country. And that was a really fun job. And so when Airbnb came my way, at that time, I never really thought that I could be in real estate. It seemed too far away. It seemed too expensive. But it was a way that I could kind of get into real estate with maybe like training wheels. And
Mm.
so I think Airbnb was, I don't know, it's just this miracle that came into my life.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned, and you said that you gotta be able to do what you enjoy and you like, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
now, there's so many people that unfortunately are going to their 9 to 5, and people. I think I heard this from I think it was Les Brown, and he made a joke, except it made a lot of sense, and he talked about how people are literally dying to go to work on Mondays, right? And then
Yeah.
he talked about it even deeper, where statistically there's more heart attacks that happen Mondays just because of that same thing, right? So it seems like it's
Yeah.
funny, yet nevertheless, people go to work that they don't enjoy. And so I do believe that, and I like what you mentioned, is that you should try to be able to really enjoy what you're doing, because when you enjoy that, then there's a better sense of accomplishment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when I started Airbnb, I was finally free. I realized like, wow, I could make enough money to live in this house for free, and maybe then some, just enough. As that time I was a student. So, students can live on almost nothing. I was just like, cool, if I have enough money for food and I can cover my rent, that's amazing. And so for me, I was happy to clean up after the guests and do everything myself to just get started. But
Yeah.
because of that, like grit and the ability to do that, I was able to become financially independent in just 2 years. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I think it was an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, no, and I have here that pretty much you went from having a huge debt to really wiping that out, right? And that was
Yeah.
because of those things, huh?
Yeah. I started with 50K in debt. Like I got out of, I had an associate's degree that I got from a fashion school, and I realized I didn't want to do that as my job. And so I pivoted to doing massage therapy. I was just going to follow in my mom's footsteps. And luckily, a friend told me about Airbnb, and that actually diverted my whole path. And so, yeah, I went from having all this debt to finding a way to have cash flow and have income come in every month.
Yeah. So, for people that want to get into real estate investing, right? There's different strategies, right? Obviously, you have your
Yeah.
STRs, you have, long terms, you have, flipping, wholesaling. Um, is your primary thing just, STRs or Airbnb in essence, or have you done any of the other strategies too?
Yeah, so I mostly do furnished rentals. So I do medium term, which is 30-day rentals, and then I do short term, which is under 30 days. I
Okay.
have some long-term rentals, but they're harder to come by this like during the high expense of everything and then the high interest rates because they just don't cash flow right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the people that might say, hey, I want to get into Airbnb or do some of that stuff. I know that there's different ways, but I want to get your take on this. There's
Yeah.
different ways where you can essentially get a property, right? Not necessarily under your name and still do it in an Airbnb. Do you do any of that, any of those strategies where, you kind of, get in that sense?
So
Where you
that's
don't
called
own it?
arbitrage, where you kind
Yeah.
of rent a property and then re-rent it out on Airbnb. So that's how I started.
Mm,
I didn't own anything at first, and I was just renting out a room, and then I was renting out full apartments. And I don't do that now because I equate that with flipping. So
mm,
basically, it's active. The way that we make money as real estate investors is we make it over time and through the equity that builds up over time as your property is appreciating. And so if you don't own it, you miss out on a lot. And so what I tell people is if that's the only way you can start, go ahead and arbitrage, go ahead and flip, go ahead and wholesale. But then you have to take that active income and plan to invest it into a buy and hold property. Doesn't matter if it's short, medium, or long term, but you got to invest that so that it grows over time because appreciation could be 50 grand a year, 100 grand a year. It's going to outpace your earnings. And
right.
so that's where you need to be when you can afford to be there.
Yeah, no, and that definitely makes sense. Definitely, that's good. So, with this, you've been able to find a lot of freedom, a lot of being able to do a lot of different things. And tell me about this
Yeah.
whole experience of traveling all over, 47 different countries and all that stuff. I mean, I think that many people, definitely want to be able to find that balance or find that vehicle. And I always tell people that real estate is definitely a wealth vehicle to be able to help you do other things that you enjoy in life, like traveling or doing whatever you might want to do.
Yeah.
How did all of that evolve for you to be able to say, I'm in a place to where I can now travel? And obviously you talked about pet sitting. I actually learned about that about 4 or 5 months ago. I was in San Francisco
Amazing.
and I was talking to somebody and they said, oh yeah, I travel all over the place and I go into other places and I pet sit and everything's taken care of. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, right? So tell me more about
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah. So I have some friends. So I had done pet sitting a bunch as an Airbnb host back in the day, because what I learned is if I can get out of my apartment, I could rent it. Right. And so me being in my apartment was not good news. So I started pet sitting just through people that, I knew or people I'd find online. But now there's a really great app. I use Trusted House Sitters, and I'm happy to give people a discount. I have a 25% off code. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to drop that in the show notes.
Yep.
But that app allows you to see people's homes, see people's pets, and then choose anywhere in the world. So I have friends that sold their home 2 years ago and they pet sit full time. They do not have a place that they actually live. They just go from pet sit to pet sit, living for free.
Wow, that's definitely is amazing, right? And so
Yeah.
when you look at the things you've created with real estate, with traveling, with doing all of this, what is the most fulfilling thing for you now?
Right now it's helping people, because once you achieve financial independence, or at least once I had achieved it, I didn't know what to do. That was my goal. That was my everything. I was like shooting towards this thing. And then I got there and I was like, oh no, I achieved this too quickly. Now what do I do
Yeah.
with the rest of my life? But it is so heartwarming to see people using some of the ideas that I've given them or helping them along the way, and then seeing them get to their freedom. And so that's kind of what I'm aiming towards now.
Yeah, definitely. And through your journey, I see here that one of the things is that you have been able to get out of the healing from anxiety and over the last couple of years, really just really look at how you take care of yourself. And you talk
Yeah.
about it's so critical to invest in your personal growth. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that, because obviously, oftentimes, I think the last thing we worry about is taking care of ourselves, whether it's through what we're eating or how we're taking care of our body. More so also, we sometimes don't really invest in ourselves, like knowledge and be able to get more stuff to help us become better at life, right? And even be able to create that
Yeah.
life of everybody. If you ask somebody, it's like, what do you want out of life? Well, I want financial freedom. Well, that's great. Everybody wants financial freedom. What does that mean, though? What is that number to
Yeah.
you? Because that is different for every single person. Or I want to spend more time with my family. What does that mean, right? And so talk about that, because I think that's huge. You're definitely making that and doing that already.
Yeah, when I was 28, so when I was buying my first property, my mom passed away from cancer. And that was just a life-altering moment for me.
Mhm.
She was my kind of my rock, my best friend, my main supportive parent. And so I think that anxiety built over time through unresolved grief. And even though
Mhm.
I've done therapy and different things, I noticed a lot of anxiety come around COVID as well. That was like a pretty hard time for me. So, yeah, I think there's not really an end to that journey. There's definitely just points where you have to take stock of what's going on inside. Like I think our culture measures success a little bit too much through financial numbers, net worth, how many properties you own, but really we need to figure out another metric, a more holistic view of like, how are you physically healthy? How are you mentally healthy? And that part I have to kind of remind myself of, because it's easy to just work, work, work.
Yeah.
Right.
You said something that really is resonating with me, and that's the fact that it's a never-ending journey, right? Being able
Yeah.
to go through all of that. And a lot of times we're looking for that magical moment, that magical pill to be able to say, we're going to do this, and then that's it. It's never going to happen
Yeah.
again. And as I think about it right now, it's a never-ending story. Yet I do believe that the things that you do, that personal development, the people you hang around, the podcasts you listen to, all of that helps you uh, build you up for the next challenge that you might be facing, for the next thing that
Yeah.
might come your way. And I do believe that as you're going through all of these different learnings, you're preparing yourself for that next battle, whatever that might be. And for those that may not do any of that stuff, it's definitely going to be even harder. And I even seen some cases
Yeah.
where you might even take you down, right, from that perspective.
Well, that's what I think kind of like the midlife crisis is for a lot of people, is
Mm.
that maybe if you're starting to do the work on yourself, maybe in college, a lot of colleges offer free therapy for the students. And I don't know if a lot of people know that, but that's an opportunity that you should take advantage of. That's kind of when I started doing therapy. I was in massage school and they had like a program with like a local other college that had therapists, and it was like $5 a session or something like that. And I think no matter who you are, we have a lot of experiences in our lives that we need to process. And so sometimes it's just nice to talk to somebody. But I do think working on yourself is a lifelong endeavor. And
Hmm.
so even just listening to books and listening to podcasts, that can be helpful because it can start you thinking, but you probably need to take those thoughts and at least journal. At the
Right.
very basic level is like, there needs to be some kind of flow of getting that processed and getting it out.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing too that you mentioned is getting. You got to be able to get deeper and deeper with oneself, and that's an incredible gift, right? Tell
Yeah.
me about what does that look like, and what does that mean?
To me, it's really knowing myself. I feel like I have a really strong connection with my intuition, and that gives me a lot of guidance in my life. I have a lot of understanding of when I feel like, oh, I'm maxing out, or I'm doing too much, or this doesn't feel good. I'm kind of an introverted person. And so it's important for me to realize my levels of feeling maxed out, because I'm not doing anyone a service if I'm completely depleted. Right.
Mm,
So I just think getting to know yourself better, you can actually, go resource yourself when you need to.
right. And would that also mean, kind of getting to know yourself better is really having those deep thought conversations with yourself. And I'm not necessarily saying get in front of the mirror and talk to yourself, but it could be maybe.
Could be.
Nevertheless, I mean, I done it before, and it was hard when I started doing it. Except it made
Yeah.
a difference. Because the reason why I say that is because, on the contrary, we're so good at talking down to ourselves and talking ourselves out of doing
Yes.
something. And we often say, something happens like, oh, you're dumb, you're whatever that might be. And so
Yeah.
I think we do very little of getting in front of the mirror and saying, no, you know what, you're freaking amazing. Whatever you did today, however it's shaped, you did a good job, kind of thing. Is that also meaning that you got to be able to do more of that?
Wow, I want to do more of that.
Yeah.
I think I'm a really critical person. That's something I took from my father, unfortunately. And so it's easy to not just be critical of the outside world, but more to yourself. And so I think a lot, probably, at least more than half of the self-talk that I have is maybe around criticism or comparison with other people. And so I have to catch that. And I think it's really a great, I don't know, that struck a chord with me of being like, okay, after this call, I'm going to go sit in front of the mirror, or, what are ways that I can be championing myself or being my own cheerleader.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So tell me about this book that's going to be coming out pretty soon. Definitely, where did the inspiration? Obviously, you're in real estate investing. You're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Where did the inspiration come about? And then what is the biggest thing that you want the reader to take away from that?
Yeah. So my inspiration is around, obviously I'm in the real estate space, and I was really into short-term rentals. And then during COVID got more into these longer stays, these medium-term rentals. And the reason I think it's so important now is because if people are trying to get in real estate investing, it's hard to find a long-term rental that's going to work, where the numbers work, where it cash flows. And so if you're trying to get started, medium-term rental is that space that's going to be a little bit easier. And so, yeah, I feel like it's very important. The thing that I love about the way that we formatted the book is I think how-to books can be really dry. And so we said, how can we make this really fun? And so my co-author and I, we both travel a lot, and we put a lot of our own case studies, our own travel stories, our own headaches. And then we brought in a lot of investors to tell stories. So I think there's a lot of teaching and learning opportunities through story, which I think is fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so I would say that not only are they going to be able to, so part of it is they're going to be able to kind of see the how-to, and then also look at the real case studies. What is the one thing you guys are looking to accomplish with the reader picking up that book and taking away from that?
Time freedom is a huge value for me. And so I'm always trying to give that to somebody else. It doesn't mean that you want to retire early. It doesn't mean that you need to leave your job. But what if you're a little more job optional? What if it gives you a little more space so that you can say, hey, maybe my wife can stay home with the kids, or maybe I can go part-time, or maybe we can travel and take a sabbatical. It's just giving you space so that you can make the choices that are best for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I often tell people when it comes down to time, that's the one thing that we don't have a lot of, right? And everything else we do, and sometimes we take it for granted. We do. And we are here today and we are gone tomorrow, and you just never know, right? So being able to create that instead of, and I'm not saying it's bad, except I think that we are in this rat race, and we constantly keep looking at that and working and dealing with all these different things, and we never take care of ourselves, and we shouldn't wait until we're in our 60s or 70s or 80s to quote unquote enjoy life. I forget where I read this, which book. I think it was probably the 4-hour week book that I read, where it talks about you got to be able to take mini vacations throughout your journey, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be anywhere far or expensive. It's just being able to say, let me not wait for when I get my 2 weeks vacations or whatever that time period is. Like, take some time during your life to just start doing little things here and there and exploring life, because again, you just never know, right? If you're waiting for that retirement, what if you don't get to that point? And then what was that whole point of doing that, right?
Well, and the way you travel in your 20s and 30s is so different than the way you travel in your 50s and 60s and 70s, right? It's like you need more comfort. It costs more. You just can't do as much. So I think it's important to have time, whether it's between a job or whatever, take 6 months, take a year, and give yourself time between those.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ways that we do it is because we're pet sitting, we work from home. And so we're not necessarily taking time off, but we just spent a month in Hawaii. And so we work from home, but then as soon as the workday is over, we're able to go surf or snorkel or, go walk on the beach. And so that feels like living in the vacation space, even though you're still getting your work done.
Yeah. I think that needs to be your next book, right? How to get into pet sitting or something.
Yeah, I talk about it a little bit in the book, but yes,
Okay,
definitely.
good. Have you ever, obviously, you've been on bigger pockets, you've done all this stuff with real estate, been very successful. Have you ever thought about creating or giving back and helping people through some sort of real estate mentoring programs, or are you already doing that, or is that something
Yeah,
coming up?
so we have a Facebook group called Airbnb Investing. So people just search that on Facebook. That's one way. So I answer a lot of questions and I do Q&As in there. And then I have a meetup here in Boulder. And so every once a month we meet up and I teach people there. And so those are kind of the ways that I try to do it. But I do it a lot with clients that are, buying homes or doing strategy sessions with me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good. No, that's awesome. And so if people wanted to get a hold of you, maybe pick up your book when it's available, or just
Yeah.
reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah. So my website is zeonamclntyre.com. So you'll have to get the spelling in the show notes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm on Instagram as well with the same handle. So definitely check out Zeona Mclntyre. But the book is already out for pre-sale. So if you go to
Okay.
biggerpockets.com/30-day stay, you can use my name Zeona for 10% off.
Oh, nice.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Yeah. So let me ask you, obviously you've gone through a lot, you've traveled over the place. What is one of the I guess maybe out of all the 47 countries, what are some of the bigger takeaways or excitements you've gone through in those trips?
Yeah, I remember feeling super connected to Africa just as a continent.
Mm,
I mean, they say that all human life originated from Africa. So I remember just feeling like a real like groundedness and connection there. When I was in Sweden, I loved talking to them about their ideas of the way that they do their culture there. And so one of the things is people are never sentenced in jail longer than 10 years. And so if they have a 10-year sentence and they're not ready to be, reintroduced, the whole time they're going through therapy and they're
mm,
working on reintroducing people to the society. They don't have any gated communities there, so nobody feels left out. So, I mean, there's just some cool things that we can take from other parts of the world, some learnings and ideas of like, how do we want to relate as a community,
yeah.
right?
Did your appreciation or your points of view in life in general change? From obviously being in the U.S. to seeing all these different cultures in different countries. Is there a different appreciation point, and how is that, and also your points of view in things?
I think travel is incredibly important for perspective, especially
Mm,
now when our country is so divided. I think that a lot of that comes from this idea that we're different. But when you travel, you start to realize, like, wow, everybody's pretty similar and we're all just trying our best. And I'm not as afraid of people. I definitely stay away from the news because that's not really serving me. And it helps with any prejudices. I think growing up, whether it's your family or the news you watch or your community, it's easy to get ideas implanted that are certain prejudices about certain groups. But when you go and live immersed and next to these groups of people, you say, we're the same,
mm, yeah, no, I love
it's
that. I
not
love that.
necessarily true. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have any habits that you practice every day? Anything that helps you kind of stay in this positive state of mind, or just center focus?
Mm. Yeah, I was a real big fan of The Miracle Morning. I don't know if
Mm,
you've read
yeah.
that book. So that was great for me, but I have a hard time with habits sometimes because I move a lot. We're always in
Mm,
different spaces. Every time I move, I lose these habits. I think the thing that's the most important to me for mental health is spending as much time outside as I can. and also doing even like 20-30 minutes of movement, but doing some exercise is a huge mood enhancer for me. So exercise is huge, but I try to just bring a sense of spirituality in everything I do. I think I used to think that I had to be meditating or, chanting or singing or doing something that was directly religious or spiritual. But now I realize, can you be spiritual at your computer while you're writing emails? Can you be embodied and spiritual when you're out in the world? How can you bring that into your every moment of every day? So that's what I'm kind of trying to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. For the people that are watching us and seeing us right now, if they're going through any kind of challenge, whatever challenge that might be, what is one thing you can say to them to start overcoming that challenge?
Don't go through it alone. I'd say that a lot of times grief or different hardships like depression or anxiety, they feel very isolating, but there are other people out there going through the same thing. Try to find community, try to find people who understand, and try not to be alone in that, because there are people that want to help and there's ways to get through anything.
Yeah, I love that. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, the saddest part is, and you mentioned there's communities and there's ways you can get that help. People are so
Yeah.
afraid to ask. People are afraid
Yeah.
to voice and say, hey, I need help. And I think you probably see that more so in the male figure than the female figure. Nevertheless,
Yeah.
it's something that it's there for you, and you should try to not try it, actually, you should reach out to somebody when you need that help, right? So
Yes. And for men, there are men's groups that you can specifically, I mean, even if you just Googled men's groups, I imagine you would find a bunch that popped up. And those are safer spaces where men are more vulnerable and open to talking about anything. And so
yeah.
maybe join one of those, even if it has to be virtual.
Right. No, I love it.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Like what are some of the next adventures and things happening, with either travel and or real estate related?
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to be going to Colombia. It's going to be country
Nice.
48 because I had
Ah,
never been there before. So that's
nice.
happening in about a week to 10 days. So I'm excited about that. And I think I'm trying to be really present in this book right now,
Yeah.
because I think what's easy to do is go, okay, I wrote a book and now I got to go do the next thing or the next book or the next whatever. And I want to just celebrate this. This is
Yeah,
a
definitely.
beautiful moment right now. Let me just kind of, yeah, share it with as many people as I can, and go on different shows and talk to a lot of people, and have this book be the biggest it can be.
Yeah, I always like the idea of we got to take time to celebrate those accomplishments, and definitely
Yeah.
that is a huge one, right? And I remember when I did my very first book, and quick story, and that is that at first I was doing it for the wrong reasons, and because of those
Yeah.
wrong reasons, very similar to what we're talking about, I talked myself out of doing it, and then I changed the dynamics, and I said, well, what if I do this for myself? I do this as a self accomplishment, not for who's gonna read it or how many I'm going to sell. I'm going to do it more for
Yeah.
me, and then also leave something behind for my daughter. And when I did that, and I changed the way I saw things, and the framing of that, and the intention of that, made much more better for me. And I'm definitely glad that I did that, because it allowed me to not only put out a book that was definitely more powerful, it reciprocated, at the end. I start seeing, the comments and the feedback. And so I do believe that we have to, at any given point, have to celebrate those accomplishments. And I think one of the biggest things is, what is that self-accomplishment that you did for yourself that is also, even when you don't see it directly and or indirectly, impacting other people's lives. And I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I consider myself an outward processor. So I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this is like therapy for me.
Ah,
Just you're
nice.
asking me these questions and I have to answer them. And I'm like, wow, I'm growing just through this experience. That's great.
Yeah, well, no, I love it. I'll definitely love it. So, yeah, I wanted to say, is there anything else that you want to share with us before I let you go?
Huh. I would say if somebody is interested in real estate, definitely just start taking the steps forward, because I think what happens is people get stuck in inaction, they get
Yeah,
paralyzed by fear. And so again, if you can find community, whether it's online or in person, go find people where this is normal, where they're also doing real estate, because maybe your friends or your family think you're crazy, but there's a lot of people doing it and you can totally do it too.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, the fear and being able to do that, and I know a lot of people might say, "Hey, I do want to get into real estate." Maybe the biggest setback, besides the fear of maybe failing, the fear of succeeding, aside from that, the next big barrier would be, well, I don't have the means, I don't have the money, the financial means to be able to do that.
Yeah.
To either invest in myself, my education, or even put some money to get a piece of property, right? How do you uh, deal with that objection, right? And still be able to say you can do it.
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways. The biggest is partnerships. So there's a lot of people that are further along in their journey that don't want to be as active. And so these are the kinds of people you can meet at meetup groups or different events where they say, I'll be the money guy, you be the property manager, go find the property, go do the renovations, whatever. And so that can be a great opportunity. And I've done that, it's
Mhm.
great. Another way is just starting to do some of those active businesses like we talked about. If you live in a property that you don't own, you can still rent out a spare bedroom. You can rent out your room and go pet sit or camp and build up enough cash where then you can go buy a property. Because if you're buying a property that you live in yourself, you can put as little as 3% down, which could be a small amount if you even just start with a 1-bedroom condo. You don't need to
Mhm.
start with a huge house.
Yeah, no, I love that. I
So,
love that. No, definitely, really appreciate all of the insight and the knowledge and the
thank
experience
you.
you've given us, and definitely looking forward to getting to read that book, because definitely I think that's going to be huge. I'm also a person that likes to travel, so I'm sure there's a lot of different things that I can take away from that, for real estate investing and all the different experiences you've gone through. And so, definitely, I want to appreciate and say thank you for taking the time to be here today, Siona. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for the rest of you guys, do me a favor, go ahead and pick up a copy of her book, To Bigger Pockets. I'll have that information on the show notes. And do me a favor, also follow her, reach out to her, and share this message, because definitely somebody needs to hear this message, and you don't know who's going to be impacted positively by that message. I'll see you guys in the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.